Hey scholars, so in the last video we started to work with GUIs and Object Pascal, and as I promised, in this video we're going to continue doing that work and we're going to do some animation. So in the last video we created this simple program, and this might not open up for you if this wasn't the last program you saved or your last program you were working on before you closed Object Pascal. So you just need to go to projects and open up this project as a review. But if you recall, it was a very simple program. We just put in our name and it shows a message. Okay. We are going to create a new program that does some animation. So to do that, we're going to go to project and then new and then application. Give us a blank slate. All right. So we're going to do something similar to what we've done in the past with Python with an TK-enter. We're going to do a bouncing ball animation. So to do that, we need to add a shape to our form, and you could do it from up here, but like I said, most of the time I just search over here. So click that and then just draw a shape, and what you'll get is a rectangle by default. As I mentioned, you can change the properties over here. So I'm going to make this a square by saying the width is 35 and the height is 35. Okay. I'm also going to change the shape property. Right now it's a rectangle. I'm going to change it to a circle. Finally, I am going to change the color. That's under brush and then color, and I'm going to change it to red. The only other component that we need for this program is a timer, because as you might recall from when we did game development with Pygame and we did this ball animation with TK, the way that we're going to simulate motion is similar to how a flipbook works. It's going to go frame by frame. So we need something to keep track of time and to execute code over and over again. When we were doing the ball animation, it was basically an event loop. When we're doing a game, it's a game loop. So let's add that. We're going to add a timer here, and this by default is 1,000 milliseconds or 1 second. So I'm going to change the interval to something smaller. Let's say 20 milliseconds. The last thing that we want to do over here is actually set up our code for when the timer is executed every 20 milliseconds. So I am going to create that procedure, and just like before, we have our shape, we have our timer, we have our procedure added to the form class. If I compile the code right now, this is what it looks like. One other thing I want to do is actually change the caption on this, change the caption to bouncing ball. So you can change it there, but also there's a bunch of things that are highlighted here in the favorite section for, these are basically just events and properties that are most likely to be needed for a particular component. So I'm going to call this ball bounce. Okay. And actually up here in the top of our code, let's put a comment like we did before as well, just explaining what we're doing. Sing ball demo. All right, so let's go back down to our implementation section, and we are going to start writing some code. Actually, before we do that, we need two variables to keep track of the state of the ball. And we're not going to define the variables in the scope of this function, because if we do that, we'll lose the information, the variable, every time that this function is executed. And the way that we have set it up, it's going to be executed every 20 milliseconds. So we need some variables defined outside of the function. And you could define them here, but this would make it global to the entire program. What you want to do is actually define them here in the private section of the class. We're going to define two variables. We want to see whether or not the shape or our ball is moving right, and we want to see whether or not our shape or our ball is moving up, and these are going to be Boolean variables. Okay, so defining them here means that they're going to be accessible to any of the procedures that we create for this form, including this one right here for the timer. All right, so let's start writing some code. So we're going to try to move the ball. This is going to be for ball movement down. So we're going to say f up is true, then shape one top is going to be shape one top minus 1. Okay, so if we're going up from the bottom, we're subtracting from y. Basically, we're subtracting. Else, if it isn't up, then shape one top going to be shape one top plus 1. Okay, so again, if we're not going up, we're going down. So we'll start adding to the top right now is going to be 80. So if we're going down, it'll add 1 to 80 and then another. And then the next time this procedure is executed 20 milliseconds after that, it'll add another 1 to 81 and so on. So it'll look like it is moving in a smooth animation. Okay. And we also need to account for when the ball hits the edges of the screen or the form. So if shape 1 top is less than or equal to 0, then up is going to be false. Okay. Again, if the top of the shape is less than or equal to 0, that means that the ball has reached the top of the form, and then we're going to change the direction to false, change up to false. Else, okay, now we need to check for it hitting the bottom. So if shape 1 top plus shape 1 height is greater than or equal to client height, it's equal to client height. Actually, client height is basically all the area within the form, not including the caption at the top of the form. Okay, so if we are greater than the height from top to bottom, that means that we're past the bottom of the form. Then we are going to change directions back to up. So let's say then up is going to be set to true. All right, so we have some basic operations here that we can test. Let's see. Okay, there's a typo here. Remove this very slow animation, but it's doing what we want it to do. And actually, if you wanted to speed it up, you could go to the timer here and change this to say 10 to run this procedure every 10 milliseconds. Or every 5 milliseconds. You could also speed up the animation by changing how many pixels we jump every time we run this procedure. So if we say move this to 5 and this to 5, okay? All right, so we handled up and down. Let's handle left to right as well. Move this over a little bit so I can see more of the code. All right, so the code for left and right is going to be very similar to this code. So I'm going to copy this and paste it here. Ball movement up and down and up and right and left. Okay, so here we're going to say if right is true, then shape left is going to be added to. Let's say add 5. Okay, and again, looking at the form, if the left is true, then we're moving to the right side. So we need to add to the x the left, basically, to move in that direction. And here, we're going to say the same thing, left, and in this case, we're going to be going left, so we need to subtract 5, okay? Now, if we run this without adding the code for bouncing off the walls, it will work, but it'll go out of the frame very quickly. And I could change this to 1 and 1 again, so you can actually see it work. So that's what basically happened. It bounced off and then went off of the screen. And then we change this back to 10 for our interval. You can see it even better, 10 milliseconds. Okay. All right. So let's add some code for the bouncing off of the boundaries of the left and right as well. Again, I'm going to copy this and then paste it here, left and right bounce. And here we're going to say if left is less than 0, then right is going to be true. And if left plus the width of the shape is greater than or equal to the client width, and right is going to be false. Okay, and that's our code done, and that's our code running. Now, one thing that you could do with this that you couldn't do with the Python version of this bouncing ball simulation is actually change the size of the form, and it would still work, because the way this is working is a little bit different than the way that we did it in Python. Okay, so you stop this and we can increment this back up to 5 and this down to 5, and you can see it moving a little bit faster. All right, so that's it for this program. If you want to save it, go to project, save, create another folder here called ball bounce, and then call it project ball bounce, and then save the unit. All right, so in the next video, what we're going to do is actually do a GUI version of our guessing game as we continue to do more GUI programming in Pascal. See you in the next one.